I came into a tough job market, but I still saw my friends that didn't look like me getting positions that didn't align with their backgrounds. For instance, I saw people who studied like Eastern European studies becoming the director of Africa within UN agencies. Meanwhile, I had dedicated my life to studying Black people. I'm also African. I studied in Africa, I've traveled in Africa, I've lived in Africa, currently live in Africa. So it was really disheartening. It took a while for me to understand what was going on.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Lara, host of Radical Acts Uncut. I'm a creative, an entrepreneur, and CEO of Impact PR. Today, I'm speaking with Kagale Agyeman Gillo. She's CEO and co-founder of DiFFvelopment. She's also my first cousin, so support runs deep. I've officially and unofficially supported development in various contexts, and I am so thrilled to have Essie joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're so welcome. Can you begin by telling me your origin story and what led you to co-found DiFFvelopment?
Oh, that is a story. No matter how many times I get asked, it always feels like a lot to answer. But development was birthed in 2015. I think the real impetus for it came as a result of graduating from college and not getting the opportunities that I expected. More specifically, so I went to Smith for undergrad, I went to University of Oxford for grad school, and I was thinking that I would go into the research think tank space, dealing with issues that impact the global Black community, but starting with the African community. Having gone to those schools, I thought I would just take my pick at jobs. That was not the case. I came into a tough job market, but I still saw my friends that didn't look like me getting positions that didn't align with their backgrounds. For instance, I saw people who studied like Eastern European studies becoming the director of Africa within UN agencies. Meanwhile, I had dedicated my life to studying Black people. I'm also African. I studied in Africa, I've traveled in Africa, I've lived in Africa, currently live in Africa. So it was really disheartening. It took a while for me to understand what was going on. And I saw a lot of my friends, my Black friends, also experiencing the same thing. Regardless of what schools they went to, what type of degrees they had, they just were not getting the opportunities. And one of my friends said, you should temp. And I was like, I'm not temping. I didn't go to Oxford to temp. So actually, the first job that I went to after graduating from Oxford was a juice bar that I worked at for the first time when I was 14. So that was, for me, it didn't bother me, but it was a humbling experience to see how people I saw from like high school saw me, not knowing where I've been, what I've done, but just assuming that I was a bum. So that was very interesting. And so going through that period, I eventually did temp. And I ended up in the financial space, as most people do when they temp, because the financial sector has a huge turnaround, so they always need people. And I was like, I don't like this space. It has nothing to do with my background, like, but I just did it. And I ended up at a nonprofit that's been around for a long time. And I started out as an executive assistant. I kind of got pigeonholed into that because prior to that, I got a job that I didn't even mention because it was about a year long and I really wasn't getting paid that much. And it was a continuation of the struggle that I was going through because I was definitely underemployed. But when I left there, I opted to temp and ended up at SIFMA Foundation, which is well, it's attached to a lobbying firm, but they're a nonprofit arm. And so they focus on the stock market game. And so I was managing eventually after being a temp, I advocated for myself to get hired. That was a process. Seeing other people that don't look like me get hired in like a month, and I'd been there for like going on 6 months, and I had to say something. And then I had to advocate for my salary. It was just a lot, but I took the job. And funny story related to that, and then I'll go back, is when I was being interviewed, the executive director said, "Why do you want this job?" And I said, "I don't." And I said, "I'm just tired. I just need a job." And she was like, "Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, "I'm going to be running my own nonprofit, but not like you. I would have started it. I'm not just going to be working." And I didn't know where this was coming from. I did not plan to say any of this. I was just tired, but honestly, it was just God before I even realized it was God saying these things. And I got into the bus and I was like, I'm not getting that job. I called I think we were boyfriend and girlfriend at the time, and I said, I'm not getting that job. I bombed that interview, but she hired me. And so I was there for about 4.5 years. And during that time, even though now I'm employed, but I know I'm underemployed, even though I'm being paid well, I can still see that there's a disparity. And long story short, eventually my partner also started experiencing underemployment and unemployment. And we're like, something has to be done. Like young, ambitious Black people need to be aware of this barrier that they're going to face. And not only be aware of it, but they also need to understand the why, the historical why, not the recent history why, the deep history why. And then they need to be provided with the tools to not only circumvent it for themselves, but help others circumvent it. So that was the background story. Yeah, there's a lot more, but that's like yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like you got right to the piece of founding
Yep.
development.
Yep, literally. So that's how it was birthed. We started talking about it. We experienced a lot of other things in between, but during that period, we just knew something had to be done. And so I started creating a curriculum, and we're like, we start going through names. And yeah, we founded development in, I think, June of 2015. So we're actually in our 10th year.
Congratulations. And can you tell everybody the mission statement of development?
Yes, so development is re-empowering the global Black community through historically centered re-education that empowers aspiring Black visionaries to develop their world differently.
Excellent. And I guess kind of when you think back to your childhood or earlier times, is there something that you experienced or a challenge that you believe contributed to your inner strength and just kind of even your inner fight to even found development, to try to change the system that you saw?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I mean, I think it just has everything to do with my upbringing. My dad is a Pan-Africanist, so I grew up hearing about the plight of Black people every day, not every day, every hour of the day. Watching movies, reading books, and just talking to him and learning from him. So it was something that was inculcated in me at a young age. I was also heavily involved in the Ugandan community. So I was very passionate about who I was, who I am, and why it's valuable. I also had a niche for helping people. So young, old, all different types of people. My friends always say, you have the weirdest group of friends. Like everybody knows you. And it wasn't necessarily because I'm outgoing, because I'm not. I'm outgoing about what I'm called to do, but I'm not outgoing for the sake of being outgoing. It was just because I had a way of people come to me with problems, and I would be very passionate about solving them. And so that mixed with the passion I had for the Black community put together, having studied it in school, traveling, seeing a bit of the Black world, and then going to a diverse, I was in a diverse community growing up at school. So I really just had a passion for Black people and for helping people. And that really gave me the drive to do the work. As far as the grit, I think it's just the work ethic that God gave me and that I saw around me, because both of my parents, whatever they do it 1,000%. So that's what I saw.
Yeah, that's great. And on this show, we unpack tests. And sometimes your test requires you to make something from nothing and to have faith in the unseen. Can you tell me about your test?
There have been so many. I would say development, when I think of development, development is a test overall because when we started it, we, we had saved, but we had just come out of paying off our student loans, getting married, and while my parents did help, we paid for a lot of that ourselves. So we went into launching an organization with very little money and but a lot of passion. And since then, every year has been reinvesting in the unseen because every year looks like if you're a very logical person and you don't have faith, you'll be like, it's not working. It's not going to happen. Like we didn't pay ourselves for like the first 5 to 6 years. And it wasn't until one of our board members came in 2020, COVID-19, and he has a financial background. And he was like, I don't care what we do, but you guys have to pay yourselves. I don't care what it is. I don't care how small. And he actually helped us because when you start paying yourself or paying people, it helps you to find creative ways to get more money. And so, but I would say that the entire journey has been a test. Every year has been a test in the same way, but in a different way. And so I think last year was a huge test because it was one of our roughest years since 2018. It was our roughest year since 2018. We brought in very little money and we've now invested in team members who need to get paid and not only need to get paid, who we need to make sure that we are sane enough to keep the organization running. And so to go into that fiscal year and to have hard conversations with people saying, I know I'm going to be able to pay you. I don't, I know it's going to happen, but I need you to rock with me. If that's not something you can do, then I understand. And those are really hard conversations. But when you have faith in something, you have them and you trust that it's going to happen.
And you've mentioned faith a lot. Can you talk to me about some of the fundamentals of faith to you?
As you mentioned, the unseen, believing in the unseen. I think faith is also about memory. That's something I'm learning a lot right now at this stage in my journey. It's about one of the pastors I listen to talks about marking the moment. Everyone says it differently, but they're all saying the same thing. When things get really tough, you have to remember those times that God did things that were miraculous. When you're in the moment, it can be hard to do that. I was just listening to a sermon today about how Elijah, that's always a tricky one, Elijah and Elijah and them working together. But Elijah had done an incredible feat, right? He did an incredible feat. He fought his enemies. He killed like 450 men. God was on his side. But the moment Jezebel, who was the person in power at the time, said that she was essentially going to come after him, he freaked out. He didn't remember the moment, right? He didn't remember all the amazing things he did. And I think that's something we all struggle with a lot because in the moment, you just get scared, you freak out, right? The funds don't look like they're there. You can't pay attention to anything you see. You have to pay attention to what you know, and that's all memory. In the beginning, before you have a relationship with God, it's just what you understand theoretically, and God will give you the foundation. But as you grow, it's about memory because now you've experienced him several times. And a big part of maintaining that memory is being in fellowship with him every day, all day, 24 hours a day, not a little bit all the time. When they say pray without ceasing, it's not a joke. It's pray without ceasing. It's a lifestyle. It's a constant meditation from the heart, in the mind, in the soul, no matter where you are as you sleep, when you wake up, when you go to the bathroom, when you're at the gym, when you're whatever. So all of those things come together to give you what you need to say, you know what? This moment is uncomfortable, but God, we've been here before. And then eventually you even get bored. You say, we've done this like 10 times. I think I'm ready for something else. And he's like, no, you're not. There's still more.
Yeah. So tell me about some of I know it's been a tough time. What have been some of
Yeah.
the high points or milestones that development has reached that you're excited about?
Oh, yeah. So I would say as much as it's been tough, it's also been wonderful, right? The whole thing. The milestones, when you're a visionary and you have big goals, like for instance, our budget has been over $1 million since 2015. We have not reached it yet. But so it becomes hard to say, oh, this was a milestone moment, right? Because there's still so much more, or you're so privy to the background of what didn't happen. Like 2017 launching, that was a big deal. You know, it was massive for us because it wasn't, people launch differently, right? Sometimes people just have an idea, they put it out there, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but hey guys, this is what I'm doing. No, we had the entire thing thought out. So when we launched, it was a big deal for us because we knew the magnitude of what we were entering. I think 2018 was a big deal too. We had a gala. It was beautiful. We made absolutely no money. We had a ton of millionaires in the room, but that's a conversation for another day. But it was an amazing event. It was a milestone. Getting through the first cohort, every cohort is a milestone for our flagship program, just because the minds that you touch and seeing their minds open up. And then I think seeing people who are completely unrelated say the same thing about your impact year after year after literally to the point where you're like, okay, like I don't even have to come to the closing ceremony. As long as they're saying these things, I know we did our job. So those are always that's like an annual milestone. I mean, this year we brought in the most money we've ever brought in, but it's still so far from where we need to be. But I would say seeing the impact annually and then those in-person engagements that we had that allowed us to feel it gave us a peek into the future. Though premature, we could see what we're capable of. So I think those are some milestones. Also, yeah, business wise, they're personal milestones, but yeah.
I've seen some of the students that have come through. Can you just kind of share a little bit of like the journey of somebody who comes through the consultrepreneurship program?
Yeah, it's a full journey. First of all, they come to us for a reason, right? They're no longer impressed with the corporate opportunities. They're looking for something different. Those are the people we're really looking for. You also have people who are like, I didn't get anything else. We're not looking for them. But the people who come and say, there's something about this mission. So the journey starts before they even get selected because they're drawn to it. And the application is an experience. And we made it that way for a reason. We ask a lot of questions about their identity that they probably never even thought about. Not just, are you Black? Where was your mom born? Where was your dad born? Where were you born? All those questions. The interview is an experience. They're always like, I've never had to answer these questions before. You know, what does it mean to be, if you say I'm from, I don't know, Ohio, I'm African American, what does that mean to you? I'm Trinidadian, what does that being Trinidadian mean to you? And so on and so forth. What is your perspective on what building wealth within the global Black community could look like? Questions that they don't get asked all the time. So the journey starts there. Once they enter, they go through a week of really intense orientation where they get to learn about Black people's history, time immemorial to present, focused on our economic history. And life is about economics, so it's really just history. It's the world history that we never forget, right? We're such a big part of the world. We're the first humans, but somehow we've been omitted from the conversation. So we put them right back into that conversation to look at when we were a world power, what did that look like? What decisions were our leaders making? What decisions were they not making? There were a lot of issues with climate change that we ignored. There were a lot of issues with trade that we ignored as technology advanced, and we were not advancing. We were still focused on one thing, right? So getting them to think about our history objectively, which completely shifts things, and then seeing how those decisions or and the lack of visionary leadership led to things like the Arab slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade, and then brings us to where we are today. We analyze the transatlantic slave trade from a marketing perspective. We look at it in terms of PR. We look at it in terms of how was how did being black all of a sudden equate to slavery and not being smart and all these things. How did that happen? What was the progression over time? So we give them the objectivity that they need to analyze who they are and where they are, and to understand that they're part of that history. Now that you know that you're part of that history and your forefathers, not the forefathers they make you say are your forefathers, what they did wrong, how can you do something different? You're part of that history. You could be a visionary leader. Let's go. So by the end of that orientation, they're pumped. They're like, let's do this. And they have to submit their business concept idea. For the next 9 weeks, they build a business concept through our supervision. It has to be community minded, meaning either a social enterprise or for profit with a philanthropic arm or a nonprofit. So a business, but how are you going to give back to the global Black community? And they have to explain how they're going to do that. They also consult for Black owned business in teams. We create the projects before they come. We work with the business before they come. And so the idea is for them to understand what goes into building a business concept and also what goes into running a business. At the same time, they are having seminars that is a continuation of our curriculum, but now focused more on present day issues around wealth building and business ownership. And we have entrepreneurs come in and talk about their journey. You've been there, you've done it a couple of times. And the entrepreneurs conversation is a continuation of the seminar. So if we talked about, let's say, let's just say wealth building that day, the entrepreneur will be someone maybe who is into that line of work, right? So they will be able to talk about estate planning and life insurance and all the different creative ways, but they also talk about their journey, and then they do their own like kind of master class. So at the end of the program, they have to submit their business concept and their team consulting report, and they present on their experience. When we first started, we used to do a big event and it was beautiful, but now we've made it private and we just do it with the cohort for now because students are participating from all over the world. So it makes more sense. It's remote. So yeah, it is a transformative experience for them. They always say that they're not the same. Their perspective is different. What they see themselves doing will be different. A lot of them change majors. A lot of them take a year off of school. Some of them drop out of school. They go ahead and they start their businesses. They start something else. And they really become part of our what we call development family and our lifelong support program, where we continue to engage alumni really for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think you hit on the fact that in this country and just in the world, the Black education that you receive is not the same. I guess if you could just kind of touch on the importance of following your calling.
Yeah, I think it's everything, right? Because if you don't, not only will you be dissatisfied, but the world around you will be, dissatisfied, right? The Bible talks about the earth literally groaning for people to walk into their calling and do the work that we were meant to do. We weren't born just to do whatever we want to do. We were born for a purpose. So when we skip out on that, the world is missing out, literally. And so not only do you feel it because there's a certain level of discontentment, right? You're like, I'm doing this, but I just don't feel satisfied. No matter how much money I make or no matter how much clout I get, it just doesn't feel right. There's that. And then there's also what the world misses out on because we all have our unique genius, our unique gifts, and the world needs them. Like not only your immediate family, but the world at large. So following your calling is everything. It adds value to your quality of life. It helps you to make better decisions. It makes you in alignment with why you're here. So what you need will follow you. You know, what you need to do the thing will follow you. And I think that's the thing that we all have the hardest time with because humans like a sure thing. But following God is it's not sure in that worldly way. It's a spiritual journey. So you have to know, okay, it may look like this is not going to happen, but I know it will because I'm aligned. So it's really following your calling is literally everything.
Love that. And if you were given a do-over, would you make your test disappear?
No, mm-mm, no, 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 because tests are elevation. So if I made my test disappear, I would literally be pulling myself down. And Lord knows, I don't want to see any of those tests again. Sometimes you repeat them. God has his own reason why, but I don't want to start. I'd rather be repeating it for the 50th time than getting rid of it and being at a lower level intellectually, spiritually. They all grow us. So, you just embrace them and you know whenever it happens, you're like, okay, you start looking at it differently. Like they say, don't look at it like a problem, look at it as a challenge, and a challenge is an opportunity.
Essie, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. This was amazing.
Can you please tell listeners how they can donate to development, support you, support the organization now and year round?
Absolutely. So the best way is to go on our website, www.diffvelopment.org. That's DiFFvelopment.org/donate. But also follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram, where we're very active. And we actually do have a Giving Tuesday campaign right now, which is awesome. So you can see the work that we do. We'll be recapping a lot of what we do and get plugged in. Please donate, support the campaign, and become part of our donor community and stay abreast of what we're doing.
Excellent. I really appreciate your time joining me all the way from Kampala, Uganda. And before we wrap, we also have the Radical Report, which is our crowdsourced segment. A single leap of faith can change your life, and you never know how your courage can inspire someone else. Write me a 60 to 90-second note that I can read to listeners about your most recent or memorable radical act and why it was worth it. You can also DM me an audio note, and if you want to remain anonymous, you can do so. And we actually received an anonymous radical report, and I will read it now. My radical decision came one night when I was just relaxing and listening to Erykah Badu's Bag Lady. It's like I heard this line for the first time. All you must hold on to is you, is you, is you. Something clicked in that moment, and I made the decision to stop deserting and avoiding myself. I realized that I've lived much of my life for others, family, friends, partners, or the opinions of strangers. I held on to and internalized their opinions, perceptions, judgments, and valuations of my life. That felt like self-betrayal and self-abandonment, so in that moment, I decided to change. It's the early days, and I've started studying what authenticity really means for me. I can't hold on to myself if I don't truly understand myself beyond the outside noise. The process is frustrating at times, but ultimately it has been a daily, hourly, continuous acknowledgement and affirmation of self. It feels sacred and safe, like finding a home within yourself. Thank you for that radical report. And please subscribe to Radical Acts Uncut wherever you stream your audio, and follow the show on Instagram at Radical Acts Uncut. Remember to embrace the beauty and the mess.